Okay, so we're working on a 2010 Chevy Impala with service traction control, service StabiliTrak, service ABS system messages, and it comes up with a C0035 left front wheel speed sensor circuit fault and a C0035 left front wheel speed sensor circuit fault erratic, symptom 0F. So we're going to test the wheel speed sensor. Got the wheel off, although you don't need to take it off to do that. And I've got the ohm meter hooked up to the two terminals on the back of the wheel speed sensor. Move this trouble light. There we go. And it's measuring the wheel speed sensor resistance. And you see on the meter it reads 1.1 kilo ohms, 1,100 ohms, which is in spec. But what I've found from experience on these things is they don't necessarily fail open or shorted in the sensor itself, but they fail shorted to ground. So I'm going to take one of the test leads off. Set this down for a second. Okay, so now I've got one test lead attached to the wheel speed sensor terminal in there, and I'm going to put the other test lead to the steering knuckle. And as you can see, it reads 1.1 ohms, 1.1 kilo ohms, which means the wheel speed sensor is actually shorted to the knuckle. Chances are if I go to the other wire in the wheel speed sensor, it'll actually read 0. So I'm going to move that over to the other wire, which is a bit of a challenge with one hand, and go to the knuckle with a pin, and as you can see, it reads 0. So the wheel speed sensor is shorted to the actual knuckle, and that's what's causing it to set a fault code. Now these things are prone to the wiring harnesses flexing and bending and breaking in here. This one I took apart to physically look at it, and it looks okay, but I'll probably order a harness just to be on the safe side in case there's more than one problem, which is not uncommon on these things. So I replace the wheel bearing. Maybe when I get the wheel bearing out, usually what happens is up in that area of the wheel bearing, the aluminum knuckle and the corrosion causes a pressure that pushes in on the wheel bearing outer tin shield, and it actually shorts the wheel bearing sensor to the actual shield. So maybe when I get the sensor out, I'll be able to see that with physically see that when the bearing comes apart. Okay, so back on this 2010 Impala, I've got the hub and bearing assembly apart. Of course, the wheel speed sensor stayed inside the steering knuckle. There you can see the reluctor. That's part of the wheel bearing assembly that rotates with the wheel. And we're going to have a look at the actual reluctor inside, or not the reluctor, but the actual sensor in here. So you can see in this area of the sensor here, right in here, the salt water builds up inside this aluminum and steel and reacts and pushes inward on this sensor. So you look very carefully up here, right in there, you can see that one terminal is actually touching the outer steel case. This one doesn't appear to be, but this one is. And that's simply because the salt has pushed in on this steel ring, this tin plate, until it shorted that terminal to the ground, and that's one of the wheel speed sensor wires. I noticed that they went back to a solid casting here. On some of the intermediate year ones, they had this relieved in this area in the aluminum, so that wouldn't happen, but looks like it's back again. So that's what's causing this fault code for the left front speed sensor, because it's shorted to ground.